Welcome back, everyone, to the channel.
Today, we are going to explore something fascinating.
You know, it's funny, or maybe ironic is the better word, how we treat the ground beneath our feet as the very definition of solid. We build skyscrapers, cities, and entire civilizations on it, yet it's actually floating on a restless, churning interior. When you really stop to think about what an earthquake is, it's basically the Earth having a massive adjustment period.
That's a great way to put it. It's like living on a giant puzzle where the pieces don't quite fit and are constantly trying to shove past each other. Those puzzle pieces, the tectonic plates, are moving at about the same speed your fingernails grow. It sounds slow, but when you realize these are trillion-ton slabs of rock, that slow crawl packs an unbelievable amount of potential energy.
And that energy has to go somewhere. I was reading that most earthquakes happen at the plate boundaries, specifically along faults. But why is it that they don't just slide smoothly? If they're always moving, shouldn't it be a constant, tiny vibration instead of these massive, sudden snaps?
It's all about friction. The edges of these plates are jagged and rough. Imagine taking two pieces of extremely coarse sandpaper and trying to slide them past each other under immense pressure. They're going to get snagged. While the edges are stuck, the rest of the plate keeps pushing. The rock literally bends and stretches like a rubber band, storing up elastic strain energy. Eventually, the stress becomes too much, the snag breaks, and all that stored energy is released in a fraction of a second.
That release is what we feel as the shaking, right? The seismic waves radiating out?
Exactly. It starts at the hypocenter, which is the actual point deep underground where the break happens. The spot directly above it on the surface is what we call the epicenter. From that hypocenter, energy ripples out in waves: P waves, S waves, and surface waves.
I've always heard about P waves and S waves. What's the actual difference in how they feel? Because if I'm in an earthquake, I'm probably too busy panicking to check the wave type.
Fair enough, but the difference is actually life-saving information for early warning systems. P waves, or primary waves, are the fastest. They're longitudinal, meaning they push and pull the ground like a slinky. Usually, they're the first thump or jolt you feel. They aren't the ones that do the heavy damage, though. The S waves, or secondary waves, come next. They move the ground up and down or side to side. They're slower, but much more powerful.
So the P wave is like the lightning flash, and the S wave is the thunder. Except the thunder is what actually knocks your house down.
That's a perfect analogy. And because P waves travel so much faster, we can detect them with sensors and send out a digital alert to people's phones before the S waves even arrive. Depending on how far you are from the epicenter, that could give you 5, 10, or even 30 seconds of warning.
30 seconds doesn't sound like much, but in an earthquake, that's the difference between being under a sturdy table and being hit by a falling bookshelf.
Precisely. It's enough time for automated systems to shut off gas valves to prevent fires, stop elevators at the nearest floor so people don't get trapped, and allow surgeons to pull back their scalpels. It's a massive technological leap.
It's incredible how far we've come, but let's talk about the scale of these things. We always hear about the Richter scale, or more commonly now, the moment magnitude scale. We hear 7.0 or 8.0, but I don't think people realize that the scale isn't linear. A magnitude 8 isn't just one better than a 7, right?
Not even close. The magnitude scale is logarithmic. For every whole number you go up, the amplitude of the ground motion increases by 10 times, but the energy release increases by about 32 times. So a magnitude 9 earthquake releases over 1,000 times more energy than a magnitude 7.
1,000 times? That's staggering. That explains why something like the 1960 Valdivia earthquake in Chile was so world-altering. That was a 9.5, the highest ever recorded, wasn't it?
Yes, 9.5. It was so powerful that it literally changed the geography of the coast and sent a tsunami across the entire Pacific Ocean. To put that in perspective, scientists believe the Earth's crust isn't even capable of storing enough energy to produce much more than a magnitude 10. You would need a fault line that wraps halfway around the planet to get a Mega-Quake like you see in Hollywood movies.
Speaking of Hollywood, there's that classic trope of the ground opening up into a giant canyon and swallowing people whole. I'm assuming that's just movie magic.
Total myth. Faults move past each other or over each other. They don't gape open. If they opened up, there would be no friction, and if there's no friction, there's no earthquake. You might see cracks in the soil or fissures due to landslides or the ground settling, but the earth isn't going to swallow a car like a monster.
Good to know. What about earthquake weather? My grandmother used to say you could feel a quake coming when it got hot and still outside. Is there any scientific backing to that?
None at all. Earthquakes originate miles underground, completely isolated from what's happening in the atmosphere. They happen in the middle of blizzards, during hurricanes, and on perfectly sunny days. People just tend to remember the weather when something traumatic happens and try to find a pattern where there isn't one.
That makes sense. We're hardwired to look for signs. What about animals? There are so many stories about dogs barking or birds flying away minutes before the shaking starts.
That one is a bit of a maybe. It's likely not that they predict the future, but rather that they can feel those fast-moving P waves that humans are too desensitized to notice. If a dog starts acting crazy, it might just be feeling the very beginning of the quake that we won't feel for another few seconds.
It's like they have a built-in early warning system. Now, I want to talk about some of the more unconventional earthquakes. We usually think of the Ring of Fire or the San Andreas Fault, but I was reading about slow slip earthquakes. What are those?
Those are fascinating. They're basically earthquakes in slow motion. Instead of the fault snapping in seconds, it slides gradually over days, weeks, or even months. They release just as much energy as a major quake, but because it's so slow, we don't feel any shaking. Scientists only discovered them because of high-precision GPS.
Wait, so a slow earthquake could be happening right under our feet and we'd have no idea?
Exactly. And the big question researchers are trying to answer right now is whether these slow slip events act as a safety valve by releasing stress harmlessly, or if they actually pile more stress onto neighboring parts of the fault, making a big, fast quake more likely.
That reads into a really interesting point. I saw a study recently about the 2024 earthquake in Chile. Apparently, it broke the rules of what we thought we knew about deep earthquakes.
Oh, the Mega-Quake. Yeah, that was a magnitude 7.4. Usually, earthquakes that deep, around 125 kilometers down, are supposed to be weaker at the surface because the rock is too hot and plastic to snap violently. But this one tore through rock that was way hotter than the theoretical limit. It suggests there's a heat-driven process we don't fully understand yet that can supercharge deep ruptures.
It's a bit humbling to realize that even with all our satellites and sensors, the Earth can still surprise us. It makes you wonder about the big one everyone talks about in California or the Pacific Northwest. If we can't even get the deep ones right, how ready are we for a surface-level monster?
The Pacific Northwest is a huge concern because of the Cascadia subduction zone. It's been quiet for over 300 years, but the geological record shows it produces magnitude 9.0 quakes every few centuries. When that one goes, it won't just be shaking, it'll be a massive tsunami hitting the coast of Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia.
That's terrifying. But we have much better building codes now, right? If you're in a modern skyscraper in Los Angeles or Tokyo, you're relatively safe.
Generally, yes. Modern engineering is incredible. We have base isolation systems where the building basically sits on giant shock absorbers or rollers. When the ground moves, the building stays relatively still, or tuned mass dampers, which are massive weights at the top of buildings that swing in the opposite direction of the earthquake to cancel out the swaying.
I've seen those, like a giant pendulum in the middle of the tower. It's like the building is dancing with the earthquake instead of fighting it.
That's exactly how it works. The goal isn't to make a building unbreakable, because anything can break if you hit it hard enough, but to make it ductile, meaning it can bend and absorb energy without collapsing.
But what about the older stuff? I read that the deadliest earthquakes in history weren't necessarily the strongest ones, but the ones that hit areas with poor infrastructure, like the Shanxi earthquake in 1556.
Exactly. That's the deadliest one on record, 830,000 people. The magnitude was probably around an 8.0, which is huge, but the reason the death toll was so high was because most people were living in yaodongs, which are artificial caves carved into low hills. When the shaking started, the hills basically turned to liquid and the caves collapsed instantly.
And then there's the 2010 Haiti earthquake. That was only a 7.0, but the destruction was absolute because of the lack of reinforced concrete.
It's a stark reminder that earthquakes don't kill people, buildings do. That's a common saying in seismology. If you're in an open field, an earthquake is just a weird experience where you might fall down. If you're in a city with unreinforced masonry, it's a death trap.
So, which is why the drop, cover, and hold on advice is so critical. I remember being told to stand in a doorway as a kid. Apparently, that's outdated.
Very outdated. That advice came from old adobe houses.
It's wild to think that the very ground can betray you like that. You mentioned earlier that there's a limit to how big an earthquake can be. If a 9.5 is the record, could we ever see a 10?
Theoretically, maybe, but as I mentioned, you'd need a fault line so long that it doesn't really exist on Earth. A magnitude 12, which you sometimes see in sci-fi, would require a fault longer than the Earth's circumference, so we're safe from the planet literally splitting in half.
Well, that's a relief. But let's look at the Ring of Fire for a second. Why is that specific area so active? It seems like 80% of the world's biggest quakes happen there.
It's because the Pacific plate is being subducted or pushed under all the surrounding continental plates. It's like a giant conveyor belt of crust being forced down into the mantle. That constant downward pressure creates the perfect conditions for megathrust earthquakes, the biggest ones possible.
And those are the ones that cause tsunamis, right? Because they're happening underwater and literally shoving the ocean upward.
Exactly. Imagine taking a giant paddle at the bottom of a pool and suddenly jerking it upward. That displacement of water creates a wave that travels at the speed of a jet airliner across the ocean. When it hits shallow water near the coast, it slows down and builds up into a wall of water.
It's a chain reaction of disasters. Earthquake, then tsunami, then often fires from broken gas lines. It's no wonder ancient cultures thought these were the acts of angry gods.
Actually, I love some of the ancient myths. In Japan, they believed a giant catfish named Namazu lived in the mud under the earth, and whenever he flipped his tail, it caused an earthquake. In Norse mythology, it was Loki struggling against his chains. It's our way of trying to make sense of something that feels totally chaotic.
But now we have seismography instead of catfish myths. How do these modern sensors work? I've seen those old school ones with the needle and the rolling paper. Is it still like that?
The principle is the same, but the tech is all digital now. A seismograph works on the principle of inertia. You have a heavy weight hanging from a frame. When the ground shakes, the frame moves with the earth, but the weight wants to stay still. By measuring the relative motion between the frame and the weight, you get a seismogram. Nowadays, these sensors are so sensitive, they can detect an earthquake on the other side of the planet.
That's how we know about the Earth's core, right? By watching how these waves travel through the center of the planet.
Yes, that's how we discovered that the outer core is liquid. S waves cannot travel through liquid, so when an earthquake happens, there's a shadow zone on the other side of the Earth where no S waves show up. That told scientists, hey, there must be a liquid layer blocking these waves.
So earthquakes are actually like a giant X-ray for the planet. We use the destruction to learn about the interior.
In a way, yes. Every quake gives us a little more data. We're even using distributed acoustic sensing now, which uses existing fiber optic cables, the ones that provide your internet, as a giant network of seismic sensors.
So the cable in my street could be acting as a seismometer right now?
In some cities, yes, by sending light pulses through the fiber and measuring how the shaking distorts those pulses, researchers can turn thousands of miles of cable into a high-density earthquake monitoring grid. It's a game changer for urban areas.
That's incredible. It feels like we're finally moving from helpless victims to active observers. Even if we can't stop the plates from moving, we're getting much better at living with them.
That's the goal, resilience. We can't prevent the big one, but we can make sure our cities don't crumble when it arrives. It's about education, engineering, and technology all working together.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up the science. It's a reminder of how dynamic our planet really is. It's not just a rock, it's a living, moving system.
And we're just along for the ride, but the more we know, the safer that ride becomes.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an eye-opening look at the ground beneath our feet. I'll definitely be looking at my drop, cover, and hold drill a little differently next time.
As you should. Knowledge is the best survival tool we have.
Thanks for walking us through this, speaker. It's been fascinating.
Anytime. Let's hope the ground stays quiet for a while.
Agreed. To everyone watching, stay curious and stay safe.
See you in the next one.
Take care, everyone.
Bye for now.
You mentioned the energy budget earlier. That's a term I haven't heard much. What does that mean in the context of a fault line?
Think of it like a bank account. Tectonic motion is the income. It's constantly depositing stress into the fault. The earthquake is the withdrawal. But not all the energy goes into shaking. Some of it goes into frictional heating, literally melting the rock along the fault. And some of it goes into fracture energy, which is the work required to break new rock.
So if a fault is efficient, it might release more energy as seismic waves or shaking and less as heat.
Exactly. And that's what happened with that Chile quake we talked about. It seemed to have a very high radiation efficiency, meaning a huge percentage of its energy budget went into the shaking we feel, which made it much more supercharged than it should have been for its depth.
It's scary to think that two earthquakes with the same magnitude could feel totally different depending on how they spend their energy.
It's one of the reasons why magnitude is only half the story. Intensity, how it's actually felt, is what matters for disaster response. That's measured by the modified Mercalli scale. While magnitude is a single number for the whole quake, intensity varies depending on where you are, the soil type, and the building design.
Right, like a 6.0 in a desert is a non-event, but a 6.0 under a city is a catastrophe.
Exactly. And that brings us to the New Madrid Fault in the central U.S. Most people don't think of Missouri or Tennessee as earthquake country, but in 1811 and 1812, they had a series of quakes so powerful they supposedly made the Mississippi River flow backward for a short time and rang church bells as far away as Boston.
Flowing backwards? That sounds like something out of a myth, but it actually happened?
It did. Because the crust in the central U.S. is older, colder, and harder than the crust in California, seismic waves travel much further without losing energy. An earthquake in the Midwest rings the continent like a bell, whereas in California, the fractured crust muffles the sound relatively quickly.
So a major quake in the Midwest could actually be more widespread in its damage than one in San Francisco.
Potentially, yes. It's a low probability, high impact scenario. We don't see them often, but when we do, they are massive.
It really is a global issue. No matter where you are, you're on a plate. Even the middle of a plate isn't 100% safe.
True, intraplate earthquakes are rare, but they happen. It's all a reminder to have an emergency kit, know your surroundings, and never take the ground for granted.
Wise words to live by. If you found this deep dive into the science of earthquakes as fascinating as we did, don't forget to hit that like button.
And subscribe for more explorations into the forces that shape our world. Drop a comment below. Have you ever felt an earthquake? We'd love to hear your stories.